So, one of the most common questions I get asked is, how do you become a real racing driver through sim racing? And it's a fair question to ask because the concept of being able to race real cars just from playing video games is pretty wild. You know, driving real race cars is typically seen as something that only the 1% club get to enjoy, right? Not your average person doesn't really get that chance. On a different note, I think more and more sim racers now are starting their sim racing journey with their main goal being to transition into a real racing driver. And yeah, the bottom line is, it is possible, but it's not straightforward and it's quite complex. So if you are a sim racer or want to be a sim racer that transitions into a real racing driver, or if you're just interested in the topic, this is the video for you. Firstly, what on earth makes me qualified to even talk about this? Well, I made this exact transition 6 years ago. I'd been sim racing for 1.5 years roughly at the time. I started it as a hobby, just as something to do after work. And yeah, in 2019, a competition was announced called World's Fastest Gamer. The prize was insane. It literally said the winner would get a racing contract for a season, and that would be a race seat worth $1 million. So yeah, fortunately for me, I won it. And then at the back end of 2019, the $1 million program started, you know, with me entering local club races to get my race license before then stepping up to race a McLaren GT3 car in 2020 in British GT. And yeah, since then, after that season finished, I've managed to get other real racing opportunities on top of that. So racing in the Spa 24 Hour twice, racing in various GT World Challenge rounds. And the important thing here is that these opportunities came in different ways. The first Spa 24 Hour came through a sponsor that I'd met in 2021. I'd built that relationship with him. And then, yeah, very, very fortunately for me, he gave me the budget to do the biggest GT race in the world, Spa. All of the races I did in 2024, so Spa, Monza and Jeddah, these were a case of right place, right time. A seat became available very last minute, and fortunately for me, the team called me and allowed me to take that seat for those 3 races. All of this came from that big breakthrough in winning World's Fastest Gamer back in 2019. And now I'm an FIA graded silver rated driver with a bit of experience under my belt, most of it racing GT3 cars. You know, if I didn't win that sim racing competition, I probably never would have drove a GT3 car. Right then, let's go through the different ways in which you can make the jump from sim racing to real racing. The first one we've already touched on as it was in my journey, and that is winning a competition. World's Fastest Gamer is one example. GT Academy, the competition that the film Gran Turismo is based off, that's another example. Of course, the most well-known winner from that competition is Jan Mardenborough, but there were lots of other winners of that competition over the years as it spanned from 2008 to 2016. You know, Lucas Ordonez, Wolfgang Reip, Miguel Faísca, Nick McMillan, just to name a few. There were more winners as well. And yeah, the names I've mentioned all went on to race at a high level. Similar to me, they raced GT3 cars in, as it's known now, GT World Challenge, but back then it was called Blancpain. So yeah, a pretty cool prize, right? But here's the bad news. There's only ever been a handful of these competitions, ever. Aside from World's Fastest Gamer and GT Academy, I can't think of any competitions where the prize has been for the sim racer to transition fully into a high-level motorsport series and race. There is and has been competitions that have handed out tests or practice sessions in real race cars to the winner, but it's not racing. You know, testing is very, very different to being a fully fledged racing driver. You know, the Alpine Esports Series is an example. The winner of that in the last few years has always got to test a GT4 car. The DTM Esports Series has done it as well. Formula E's also done it. And yeah, I'm sure there's plenty more. Racing Prodigy are doing quite an interesting thing at the minute where they're running their own series and the grid is only occupied by sim racers racing for sim racing teams in radicals. So yeah, that'll be interesting to see where that goes. Will they eventually put these drivers into a high-level motorsport series against other racing drivers? Time will tell. But yeah, the overall point here is that these competitions are very, very rare. And it's usually only the winner of these very, very rare competitions that actually goes on to race. So yeah, I'm a very lucky guy to sit here and say I entered one of these competitions and actually won it. But yeah, why are there not more of these competitions? Well, they're just not that profitable. So unless there's a passionate investor or a company with excess budget or the money to pay for it, basically, they're just not going to happen. So yeah, that's why I think they're so rare. It's because they're so expensive. And yeah, finally on this topic, so say you enter one of these competitions, say you win. Once you complete the season of racing, you know, your prize, there's a high chance that that's it. You know, that's the end of the road. And so then it's up to you as an individual to find the budget, to find the opportunities to continue racing year in, year out. And yeah, that's my situation basically. So, you know, as lucky as I am, it does obviously suck that once that prize is over, that is it to an extent. But in fairness, winning the competition and getting yourself that prize is a massive foot in the door. So another way people can use sim racing to get into real racing is through sponsorship. And yeah, that's quite a broad term, so let me elaborate on that. Basically, if you can leverage what you have, so say you have a big audience or social media following that you've built up through sim racing, if you can leverage that, then you have a solid chance of finding yourself some real racing opportunities. Some examples of this would be Jimmy Broadbent or Super GT, Steve Brown, Jardier. So there's plenty more as well. And yeah, whether they get the actual budget through sponsorship to go and pay for a race seat, or they might just get given an opportunity and the race seat itself, it doesn't really matter. Either way, they're getting the same thing in the end. They are leveraging their audience, which they've built up through sim racing, and forging real racing opportunities from it. Obviously, the bigger the audience you have, the more chance you have of making this happen. But yeah, at the same time, it doesn't have to be your audience or following that you leverage to make this happen. If you have a big CV in sim racing, so maybe you've won lots of high-level competitions, if you have a decent pedigree in this space, you could also use that to get the sponsorship and the budget to then allow you to race. An example of this would probably be Igor Fraga, who won competitions on Gran Turismo, and then I'm pretty sure Gran Turismo were part of his sponsorship package that got him into racing FIA F3 a few years back. So yeah, although the prize for winning Gran Turismo wasn't racing in FIA F3, it happened, and stuff like that can happen if all the stars align. Other examples of people I'd put in this category would be Cembolot Bassi or William Byron. They all sim raced at the beginning of their journeys and then somehow leveraged it, allowing them to go on and have the real racing careers that they've had. Whether that was through sponsorship budget or family wealth or whatever. Honestly, I'm not too sure about those particular individuals. But overall, yes, the sim racing to real racing story has been around for a while, but in the eyes of most people, it's still a very cool concept. And therefore, it definitely interests people when you're talking to people about sponsorship. There have also been some outliers when it comes to sim racers who have made the jump into real racing. The most recent example would be Sebastian Job, who recently drove an F1 car, and I think that came about as he's been a professional sim racer for the Red Bull esports team for a few years now. Another example of this would be Chris Lullum, who's been racing in GT World Challenge this year, and because he's been racing with Team Redline, Max Verstappen's esports team, for a number of years, he's now been put into a GT3 car this year for the whole season. So yeah, there's definitely an element of being in the right place at the right time, and things will happen. But as I say, there's not many examples of this happening. And that is really the biggest point I wanted to get across in this video. Using sim racing to get into a real race car is a very rare thing. It doesn't and hasn't happened that often. As well as that, getting into a race seat where you're actually racing at a high level in motorsport, that's even more rare. So I just wanted to use this video to set some expectations, basically. I see a lot of comments, messages. I've actually spoken to people as well that say they've started their sim racing journey to become a real racing driver. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It is possible, but I just want to let everyone know how unlikely that is. And yeah, there's a huge amount of luck involved. And yeah, these are the truths around this topic. Sim racing to real racing is a really cool concept. And honestly, I wish every sim racer gets to experience what it's like to drive a real race car, because there really isn't anything else like it. But in my experience, and I've been in this space for a little while now, opportunities are few and far between. All you can do though is just focus on the things in your control that will help. So, your ability in a sim, your performance, growing a brand, growing a following, all these things will increase your chances of making that happen, as it has for me and quite a few others over the years. I hope you all enjoyed the brutally honest video once again. Make sure you check out this video where I chat about the current situation sim racing esports finds itself in, and I will catch you lot next time. Goodbye.